I'd love for you to leave a comment in the comment section, depending on where you all are viewing me at. On Teaching Tip Tuesday, I live stream from multiple platforms. You could be interacting with me on Twitter, or you can be on Facebook or YouTube. And that brings me to my next point is, if you are watching me on YouTube, which seems like I'm having an issue over here, don't forget to subscribe and like my channel so that other people can actually take advantage of watching the YouTube videos. So I'm trying to see why I gotta check my stream. I'm having some issues right now. Make sure, let me check one thing right quick on Twitter to make sure, because it seems like there's a technical issue on one of my streams. Let me see. Let me see. There's an extreme lag on there. Okay. Anyway, let me check Twitter right quick. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because if you can't catch me live, you can catch me on YouTube on the replay. And, you know, that's where all my Teaching Tip Tuesdays are housed at. So definitely, if you're one of those people that, we're all busy, we have a busy schedule, you can catch me over there live or on the replay. And especially if you're not on my email list, a lot of times I send out stuff to my email list, reminders about Teaching Tip Tuesday and other things that I have going on. For example, right now I am running a fraction workshop for struggling learners. So that registration will be closing in a couple of weeks. So if you have not registered for that and you're waiting till the last minute, when I hit 30, I'm going to click that button and say registration is closed. Oops, wipe that down. So definitely go ahead and sign up for that, because you don't want to be the last person that has been waiting and wanting to, and you waited till the last minute and you missed it, because I only have enough space for 30 teachers. And you're probably saying, well, it's virtual. Well, I like to have quality workshops, so I stop it at 30, because I would like to be able to engage my audience and not have such a large group. So 30 teachers is what I am actually going to host. All right, so tonight's topic, because we only have 30 minutes and I have eaten that up with technical difficulties. So tonight's topic is about end of the year reflections. And what I wanted to talk about is really self-reflection. A lot of teachers, and they used to tell me this all the time when I was early in my career, that, you know, there are teachers that are consciously competent and unconsciously competent. And then you have the consciously competent and the unconsciously competent. So that's where they ranged at. So one of the things that reflection helps with is bringing you to a point where you self-reflect on your teaching practices. Now, within that self-reflection, a lot of times teachers look at themselves from a lens of standardized testing. Standardized testing is not it's not a good indicator of success or lack of success. I know that school districts and districts, the state measures us on that. But the problem is that I'm looking at my stream. Um, is that it's not a good indicator because it's a summative assessment and it doesn't measure how well your teaching strategies and how your delivery of instruction. There's no reflection on that. It's just, hey, the kids either they made it or they didn't. And who, like, I know the kids have to deal with that, but one of the things that you can take the stress off of you is knowing that if you're reflecting on strategies and things, just your delivery of instruction, on how you deliver this instruction to your students, then you will have a better chance of that last outcome, which is that last data point, being very high. Now, and you're probably saying, well, how do you know that? Because I am a, reflector. One of the things school districts don't do well, they don't give us enough time to reflect. But I have gotten to the point, I guess within the last 5 years, especially since I've been doing turnaround work, I have gotten to the point where I write things down as I'm in the moment. Like if I'm in a small group, I write it down in a notebook and thinking about what the child said, because I've gotten to the point where kids have so many gaps that I can't keep up with it. And that's just the reality of it. I cannot keep up with it. So I write down those things and then I go back. And I'm an early riser. One of the things that I do recommend is that you have a morning routine. Morning routines are important. I didn't have one until like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but they're important because it sets your day on the right path. And I know well, I'm tired, and I get that. But I wake up early. Even when I'm tired, I wake up early enough to make sure that my routine is in, tact, because it just sets me, I'm able to sit down. I have morning meditation and devotion. And I do all of those things in the morning before I get to school to help me flow into that sometimes chaotic space. So it helped. And in the morning, I have reflections. Now, end of the year reflections, it has to do with reflecting on your instructional practice, like it is. And there's this thing called reflective practice. Reflective practice, inside of that is self-reflection, but you have to be truthful about your instruction. Like you cannot say, oh well, I did my best. And I know a lot of teachers are like, well, I did my best, but but here's the thing, you're a teacher. And if your children come with gaps, which you know that up front because you have that data from the previous year, or you have teachers that have spoken about the children, those are things that as teachers we're supposed to prepare for. Now, I'm not saying that you should have, like, your kids should be on grade level by the time they are the end of the school year. What I am saying is that we're responsible not from where the children begin, but where they end at the end of the school year. We're responsible for our efforts. Our students, the one with the largest deficit, should be better off had they come through your classroom than they were when they entered it. And that's the expectation. It's not that you have to have, like, the kids are 3 years behind and then miraculously they're on grade level. No. What you can expect is growth. And that's reflection. Did you grow the children? And that's what I look for at the end of the year, because we have to be able to tell the truth about the situation that we came in. That perfect Patty syndrome, there's no perfect student or perfect teacher. At the end of the day, you are responsible for your efforts, and that's what you reflect on. Now, we get to this thing called critical reflection. And there's this author, his name is Stephen Brookfield. And what he talks about is having different reflections from different perspectives. Now, the first one is you reflect from your autobiography, basically your life and how you see it. Then you reflect from the student's eyes, and that definitely should be an eye opener, because the way that students see us and the way that we see us are totally different, or a way that they view their experience. Because I'm gonna tell you, case in point, I had a little girl. I had her in fourth grade, and I saw her like the next year. She was in fifth grade. And I was like, well, how's fifth grade going? Just, talking, see how it was going. She was like, we ain't learning anything. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, all we do is play all day. I was like, I know you all aren't playing all day. It's fifth grade. Well, from her perspective, she felt like being in centers and rotate, she wasn't getting what she needed. And a lot of teachers think, oh, but workstations are great. The kids get to practice. And she felt like they were just playing, and it wasn't valuable to her, and it wasn't authentic learning. So she just felt like they just sat and played in workstations all day. So when you look at your teaching and you're reflecting through the student's eyes, do you ever ask your students about how do you think the lesson went? So I was telling my students that I'm going on an interview because I'm switching schools next year. So I have to do a little teach back, which is not a big deal. But I said, let me go ahead and try this on my students, because see what they have to say. So it's over prime factorization. I haven't taught sixth grade in a while. So, I was making sure that I had all the components in there, because my kids didn't know prime factorization, unbeknownst to me, because I didn't cover that this year. So I rolled it out to them. I was like, well, what do y'all think about the lesson? Does it make sense? They were like, yeah. They was like, I don't remember learning that in sixth grade. They learned it. They just weren't in class when it was taught. So they gave me some really good feedback, because at the end I asked them some questions. Well, what is a prime number? And they could tell me, well, what is the difference between a prime and composite number? And I put some other things in there to support the kids. I put a T-chart in there to support them with the multiplication. So I wanted to see what their perspective was. And if you're not asking your students and haven't asked your students throughout the school year, how do they feel about a lesson? Do they think they learn? The goal is to create student agency, meaning that they have some type of say in what they're learning and how they're learning, and really paying attention. I call it advocacy. And I tell my students, you're not going to always have a teacher that is effective. So you have to know what works for you and how to communicate with your teachers about your needs and your academic needs as far as learning goes. So the third one is from your colleagues' experiences. So Stephen Brookfield talks about seeing your lessons from, or your instruction from, your perspective, your student's perspective, and your colleagues' perspective. Now, let me tell you about my colleagues. I don't know why they think I'm woman, and I'm not. And I tell people that. I said my lessons fall apart all of the time. And I just know that, especially when I'm trying something new. Like this week, I'm trying my 2-week project, 2-week project-based learning project, because I want teachers that deal with kids like mine that are behind, struggling learners, to know that project-based learning is accessible for kids, and it doesn't have to be a 6-month project. It could be 2 weeks with not a lot of stress, and you can continue to do 2-week projects with them, something to gauge their interest. So my students are pretending that they're an investor, and I wanted to bring in like a human rights type of feel to it. So my driving question is about, how can they create a presentation to explain to consumers or young consumers like themselves, how Nike profits off for low wages in other countries. So we're going to delve into really some things that I want them to be exposed to that they don't see. And then we can compare it to the wage issue in America. So I'm really looking forward to them because they're really like social issues. So I'm looking forward to that. But that's one of the things. Like my colleagues think that I just kind of make these things overnight. And I don't. I seriously don't. It's something that, like that project, I started working on it a month ago and trying to flush out my thoughts. And that's one of the things that I have an issue with. And the last perspective that he talks about having critical reflections around it, well, from a perspective, is theoretical literature. I read all the time. And one of the things that I notice that teachers do not do, they don't take the time to read. And I'm going to tell you what I do. Remember, I said just a few minutes ago, I have a morning routine. And people are like, well, how do you read books? Well, in my morning routine, it's called the Miracle Morning. And I'll put it in the chat. And I take 15 minutes. It's a book that I want to read. I take 15 minutes in the morning to read some of a chapter, depending on how long the chapter is. If it's short, I may read all the chapter in 15 minutes. So that's how I digest my information. And it gives me some time, like I'm not running, trying to get things done and then trying to read. But in the morning, I take that time and I sit down and read. And to be honest with you, I can finish a book in 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how long the book is. A medium-sized book, 200 pages, I can finish that within a 2-week period. So that's how I digest literature, but you have to make an effort. One thing about teaching and, being an effective teacher, which I hate that word effective, but they use it, so I'm going to use it. Being an effective teacher is that you have to read. You have to read. You have to keep up with the research. You have to be able to justify why you do things. One of the issues that I see, especially with dealing with teachers who have low evaluation scores, is that they can never defend why they use the strategy. I promise you, every time I go up against a principal or administrator and I have to defend my instructional strategy. Now, mind you, we're talking about administrators that have never taught math in their life. Most of them haven't. I've been teaching 21 years and I had 2 principals that have taught math. And that's it. That really is it. I've had 2. So most of the time you have to educate your administrators on why you use certain instructional strategies. And if you can't do that, all is lost. And that's where a lot of, especially first year teachers, get hung up at. And your mentor is supposed to support you in that quest to defend and educate people on why you use instruction strategies, because a lot of principals may not even agree with how I teach. But at the end of the day, my numbers move. They are on a steady climb. And I tell principals, if you want the results, you have to allow me to teach and move the kids in a way that makes sense to me, in a way that is instructionally and pedagogically sound. Now, going back, just doing a little recap. So, when you are going through your end of the year reflection, and it's based on your instructional practices and closing gaps and growing kids and moving them. You need to try to look at it, and I said try, or let me say attempt to look at it from your perspective, your students' perspective, your colleagues' perspective, and from a theoretical perspective, meaning literature. Theoretical literature. Is it supported? And if it's not supported, you need to look at and see why. Because generally, and I'll be honest with you, I don't always have a name for the things that I do. But when I read, like this book, Formative Assessment, in practice, it's exactly what I do. It just didn't have a name to it. Then I teach from my students' strengths, and guess what? There's a book called Strength Based Teaching, which I currently purchased and is on my list during Miracle Morning to read. So when you're looking at these and you need to reflect, think about your critical reflections and looking at it from those four different perspectives. How do your colleagues view your instructional practice? And that's not to say, and I'm not saying take it with a grain of salt. Take it as information. Just because somebody says and may not agree, that can set you up for dialogue to educate them on a new practice. But don't take it as somebody's trying to take a dig at your instructional practice. Just because somebody says it doesn't mean it's true. That's their opinion. People are entitled to their opinion. And we have professional differences all the time and instructional differences in how we get things done based on the demographic of students. So that is all I have for Teaching Tip Tuesday. But before I go, I want to invite you to actually register for my fraction strategies for struggling learners. You can go to theignitedteacher.com/live workshop registration. If you're on YouTube, it is in the chat. It's pinned at the top. Once this YouTube video renders and it becomes available, I'm going to put it as a pinned comment. If you are on another platform, you can hop on over to YouTube and register today. Like I said, in 2 weeks, I will be closing registration. And that's with 30 people or without them. It will close in 2 weeks. The live workshop is a series of 3. It's a series of 3. I will open it up again for the 2. So it's June 14th, June 21st, and June 28th. After that, it will be closed. I am not opening up. If people, because you have the option of joining or registering for all 3, it's only $10 per workshop. And most people are taking that option. They are actually signing up for the 3. If I have 30 teachers that sign up for the 3 by June, I think the 7th is when I'm cutting it off because I need to prepare for the workshop, then I'm shutting it down. But I need you all to actually sign up and do not wait till the last minute, because I know that a lot of people are. I know you're busy shutting down the school year. I get it. No harm, no foul, but I'm letting you know as a friendly reminder that the registration is going to end June the 7th. So register for that workshop. It's going to be filled with strategies that you can use. I promise you that there are strategies that I've used in my classroom, and it's going to be a great virtual workshop. And you'll be spending 3 glorious hours with me on a total of 3 glorious hours. So register today. Don't wait till the last minute. And thank you for listening and watching Teaching Tip Tuesday. I hope that you learned something. If you did learn something, leave it in the comment section on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and I'll respond as soon as I can. See you in my next live stream. Have a good evening.